Welcome back everyone, I'm Brian and today we're going to talk about eyes. So we've already covered the structure of the head. We kind of talked about the big shape of the head and we talked about the overall structure and the brow and how that works. So now we're going to start getting into individual features, right? And so we're going to start with eyes and kind of work our way down. There's a lot that you need to know about eyes. We're just going to go over some of the basics today. So here we go. So the first thing we need to know is just kind of the general structure of an eye, right? So we'll kind of start thinking about the ball of the eye. Right? Just start with a nice circle. Doesn't have to be totally perfect, but it's a good idea to spend some time practicing your circles. Right? And then we have the iris in here. And then of course the pupil sits inside the iris. Basically like that. Right? So then from there, we're going to have the tear duct. Tear duct usually sits kind of toward the bottom of the iris, right? So, and towards the outside of the eye, it's going to sit right around here maybe. And then from there, it's going to kind of cut in a little bit. And then we get a very specific shape that happens here, right? So what happens is the eye usually has like 3 different sections to it, right? So there's like the part that goes up this way, right? And then a part that kind of comes back down around this way. And then another part that sort of drops back down around this direction, right? And then we hit kind of the end of the eye, or the end of the eyelid right about there, right? The next part is composed of 2 sections, right? So here we have 1, 2, 3 sections. This part down below is going to be basically 1, 2 sections. Right, so we get something about like that. And now we need to come in and figure out kind of what comes next, right? So we need to understand that the eyelid itself has a thickness to it. You know, they're not two-dimensional. They have like a thickness to them. So typically we'd be able to see up into this lid up here. It's going to wrap around this way and then kind of connect over into the tear duct around here. And then it usually kind of also wraps around this way, right? And then down here we get the thickness of the lower lid, usually coming down here and just kind of wrapping around this direction. You know, and then from there we can come in and attach the lids to here. Right, we get the lower lid kind of wrapping around that way. Upper lid is usually going to wrap up around this way. And then usually kind of back down this direction. Sometimes there's like a little bit of a pocket right up in there. So now you can kind of see what's going on, right? We have like a 3-dimensional kind of feeling here where the brow bone now is going to be riding up along here, right, and kind of cutting down this way. And I don't know, we don't need to get that far into it, I guess. But the idea here is that if we had a contour line wrapping around this section here, it would kind of be coming down like this, hit the brow bone, wrap back in, out across the lid this way, then hit the thickness of the lid, so it would kind of cut back in a little bit. Then we hit the ball of the eye out here, right? And then we get the thickness of the lower lid, cuts back in, and then down the cheek, right? So we're thinking of this as a 3-dimensional object. Can't stress that enough. Right over here, it's coming in this way, wrapping around the brow bone, coming out across the lid, cutting back in, across the thickness of the lid, across the ball of the eye, right, across the thickness of the lower lid, down, and then out across the cheek, right? So we're developing the 3-dimensional structure that includes the thicknesses of the lids. We've included a little bit of the brow up there, which you don't really need right now, but it's good to know kind of how this fits up in there. And yeah, so next what we need to think about is what happens when we turn the eye, right? So let's find another ball, right? Nice kind of round, circular type shape. And now let's think about, like, well, if we took this eye and rotated it, right? What happens? You know, the tear duct is going to move way over here. And what's going to happen is the lids are going to go and wrap around the ball of the eye, right? So in this case, they're going to come out and around, basically like that. Right? Remember, we're seeing some of the thickness of the lid. Up around here. And then the ball of the eye passing out around here. Right? And then we get the lower lid coming back around this way. Not liking that shape. Right, so now our lids are attaching like up around here, kind of back down around here. You know, we can see we're kind of creating that opening for the eye to poke out of. We can see them clearly coming and wrapping around the eye right there. You know, and then the iris would sit in here, something like that. Now, the iris itself is actually has a big lump on top of it, right? So in reality, this would probably poke out even farther, right? And then the iris would sit kind of like back in here a little bit. All right, and the reason for that is because if you look at the eye from the side, would you like to know more about drawing eyes? At foundationartschool.com/subscribe, you'll find our brand new subscription library that you can access to watch over 130 demos that teach you everything from head drawing, figure drawing, perspective, hair, features. We're basically focused on foundational drawing principles, right? And kind of showing people the concepts that you need to build upon to get more advanced and eventually work your way up to a more advanced program, right? There are a lot of really good schools out there, and there's more popping up, it seems like, every single day. Our goal is to help get you ready for those more advanced places. So when you go take those classes, they're really cool. They're taught by industry professionals usually, and they show some really advanced concepts that look awesome, but you can feel really lost at the same time. So our goal is to get you ready for that and to walk you through all of the foundational principles that you need in order to succeed at those other places. foundationartschool.com/subscribe. Check it out, and I think you'll find exactly what you're looking for. So here's the ball of the eye, right? And now let's add the iris on here. Say it sits like this. We're looking at it from the side, so it's very, very thin. Right? And what happens is the cornea sits out in front of the iris out here. You know, so we actually get this kind of shape where the eye itself bulges out in front of the iris. Right, kind of like that. And then the pupil now is sitting kind of like right back up in there. You know, we could probably just barely see it, if at all, from this angle. Which brings us to what does the iris look like from different angles, right? So what we're going to look at now is if we just take the iris and look at it straight on, right? Looks about like that, right? We have the iris and the pupil. When this rotates, what happens is, first it turns into an ellipse because it's rotated. But then what's interesting is that the pupil shifts over here to the side, kind of like that. And the reason for that is because the iris is actually concave, right? It's actually like a dish type shape, right? With a hole in the bottom. So as it rotates one way or the other, we end up seeing more of one side or the other. And, you know, what we end up with is contour lines kind of doing this, right? Kind of showing that it's concave. I don't know if that helps. That looks like it's going the other way. It just depends on how you look at it. Right? And then when it goes the other direction, like say this one's looking right at us, this one is looking this way, right? So we end up with this kind of shape here. Right, like that. And then this one's going to look more like this, because it's looking over this way. Right, kind of like that. So now this one's looking this direction. Right, and all of this comes from the fact that the iris itself, again, is concave, right? It has like this kind of shape to it. You know, and then it just happens to have a hole in the bottom of it. Like down there. Don't really need those lines. They're not really on there. Just trying to show some contour lines to help show what's going on exactly. Right, but this would be like if we tilted it like back that way. Right, like that, right? And then these, really, we would be seeing the bottom a little bit, but in an actual eye, you can't see that part because it's covered by the sclera. The sclera is the white of the eye, in case anybody was wondering. So that's kind of generally some of the concepts we need in order to draw eyes, you know? And then from here, you can kind of see, right, based on this, if the eye's looking this direction, like this one is, that pupil shifts towards the back. So that pupil now is going to sit right back in there. Right? And so thinking of these as three-dimensional structures is really the key to getting this to work. And keep in mind that this I drew very clearly, right? Like it's clearly 3 parts. This part is clearly 2 parts. Not everybody's head is that clear, right? Everybody has different shaped eyes. Every single person you draw is going to have a slightly different shape to their eye. Some people, yeah, you can see these parts very clearly. Other people just have very rounded eyes. And those parts are still there, but they're kind of blended together more into a much rounder shape.